With the New York Yankees publicly frustrated with their Cody Bellinger negotiations, the door has been cracked open for the New York Mets to swoop in and sign the top free agent left on the board.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're listening to Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. On the show today, we're going to talk about Cody Bellinger in particular. The first segment, I want to detail the latest on the negotiation between Bellinger and the Yankees and which other teams could jump in and try to sign him, including, of course, the Mets. In the second segment, I want to discuss if there's any downside to giving Cody Bellinger the exact contract that just handed out to Bo Bichette. And then in the final segment, we'll go through some reporting from The Athletic on what the Mets are looking at right now in the market, which other free agents could fit, which other trade targets are they looking at. We'll go through all the names that have been connected to the Mets. Before we get to any of that, though, I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. This is the #1 daily podcast on the New York Mets. If you want to find some of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the editor-in-chief. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are here. FanDuel is in playoff mode. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. So let's talk about Cody Bellinger. The New York Yankees are pretty much where the Mets were a year ago regarding their negotiations with Pete Alonso and Scott Boras, where they knew they were the only team in. Boras was trying to pretend and drum up a market for Alonso that a year ago did not exist, and it boiled over to the point of frustration publicly. That's where we're at. The Yankees believe they have a fair offer on the table, and they decided in a competitive market for a player that they badly want that this was supposed to be their key piece of their offseason. They're letting everybody know what their bid is, which isn't typically what you do if you're trying to get a player. 5 years, $160 million with multiple buyouts. Multiple opt-outs for Bellinger. So he'll have ample opportunities to test the market. I believe that was actually reported too, that it would be after year 2 and year 3, Cody Bellinger could opt out of the deal. So now everybody knows, okay, that's the offer. We can all top it and get Cody Bellinger depending on which teams are interested. So you have that as a fascinating just backdrop to the Mets potentially getting in on Bellinger, that the Yankees have wanted him all offseason. He was a perfect fit in his 1 year with the club. But they don't want to bid against themselves, and they're pissed off that their offer that they think is fair is not getting accepted. But if you're Scott Boras and you just saw Bo Bichette is making $42 million per, and Kyle Tucker is making in present day value $57 million per, and he got $240 million over 4, you're saying, why can't my guy get $240 over 7? Because the reports are that what Boras wants for Bellinger, 7-year deal, more than the $32 million per. $240 over 7 is $34.3 million per. That might be what they're looking for. They are not going to get it, but the more that this drags out, the more that the Yankees are fed up, they're starting to look at their outfield, and they're starting to talk themselves into, all right, well, Jason Dominguez deserves some run. Trent Grissom's back on the qualifying offer. We have Aaron Judge. Let's just sign Austin Hayes, throw the double birds at Boras, and move on with our offseason and try to get some pitching. Maybe they're a team that gets Freddy Peralta. Maybe they say screw it and they try to sign Zach Gallen. We have no idea what the Yankees' plans are, and obviously you can check out Locked On Yankees to learn more about what they're doing. I honestly think that they up their offer to 6 years, $192 million, so they just added on a 6-year, they might get the deal done. But to their credit, why go to a 6-year if nobody else is going to even give him 5 years? And so it puts the Yankees in a weird spot. It puts Bellinger in a weird spot because he's not just taking what I think probably is a fair offer that's on the table. I understand the high AAV contracts that are out there and how this might not be the absolute maximum earning potential for Cody Bellinger to take this deal. But we also can't forget a year ago, Cody Bellinger was traded for Cody Petit because nobody wanted to pay him $25 million or whatever it was. In retrospect, the Mets should have picked him up last year because they could have got him for nothing. But the Yankees did. He had a great season, and now he's trying to get paid off that great season. I think a lot of teams are concerned that he's not going to be as good for their team as he was for the Yankees in a ballpark that was tailored to his swing. So if you're the Giants, yeah, if you could get 29 homers out of Bellinger next year, you'd be in. But if you think he's not going to hit in your ballpark and it's just about bringing the glove in, well, why spend to that level? I think right now there are probably 4 teams that make sense for Cody Bellinger. Obviously, the Yankees. The Blue Jays just missed out on Kyle Tucker. This is as close as you're going to get to Kyle Tucker on the market. Now, they had $350 million over 10 years on the table for Tucker. Are they going to put 7 for 210 on the table for Bellinger? $30 million per over 7 years? If they did, I think they get the player, and it makes them that much better. Not to mention, you pull Bellinger from your division rival. So I would not discount the Blue Jays in this. And I think if he gets a 7-year deal, that's the team that does it. The other team that could do it, theoretically, the Phillies. They just had 7 for 200 on the table for Bo Bichette. Could they just give that contract to Bellinger? Well, maybe, but they already pivoted. They signed JT Realmuto to an absurd 3-year, $45 million deal that has incentives that could take it to $20 million per instead of $15 million per. Do they still have the money to spend on Bellinger? We could find out. Sure, we'll see. But I don't know if it necessarily is on the table for them. I think it's more likely that they would end up reuniting with Harrison Bader because it's going to be significantly less money, and it would probably fit closer to the same salary slot that you had pegged for Bichette. Realmuto and Bader are probably close to what you were going to give Bichette, and certainly less years overall that you're tied to those guys. Which brings us back to the Mets. Can the Mets put a 3-year offer on the table that is so attractive that Cody Bellinger says, yeah, I could get the 5-year deal for $160 from the Yankees, or I can take the Bo Bichette contract. The Mets could literally copy and paste the deal. It's pretty much what they did a couple years ago where they had Max Scherzer already, and Justin Verlander was a free agent. So they said, all right, we'll give you what Scherzer's getting. What Scherzer's making per year, you can have it. And Justin Verlander was a New York Met. They have an opportunity right now to do the exact same thing. To put 3 years, $126 million on the table to Cody Bellinger and potentially make one of the best lineups in all of Major League Baseball. Are there any downsides to a short-term, high AAV deal for Cody Bellinger? That's what we're going to discuss here in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is officially in playoff mode every game day during the NFL playoffs. FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel is giving users a profit boost pack that's just waiting for you inside the app. And each game day, you'll see that pack is loaded with multiple profit boosts that you can apply to the bets that you like most. That's what makes this so cool. It's not just pigeonholing you into a specific bet. You open up your profit boost pack first thing on game day. You see what boost you want to apply, and then you lean into your own game day instincts, whether it's backing momentum, defense, quarterback play, whatever it is, coaching. The boosts are going to give you more juice on the bets that you already like instead of forcing you to bet something new. Every play feels bigger, and the boosts make your bets feel that way too. You make your picks, you apply your profit boost, and then you can go for an even bigger payout while the playoffs are rolling. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 16,000 subscribers. So now, as we focus on the Mets and their payroll, does it make sense to give Cody Bellinger the Bo Bichette contract? Well, if we take the Mets at their word, or Steve Cohen at his word earlier this offseason, when he said that the payroll is likely to be where it was last year, the Mets would not have the room for Cody Bellinger. They probably wouldn't have had the room for Bo Bichette. Right now, you look at the three different places that I try to go to find out what the luxury tax payroll is for the Mets, and they're all telling you different things, and it's always really confusing. But you go to Spot Track, they're saying the projected luxury tax end-of-year payroll for the New York Mets is sitting already at $360 million. Last year, they came in a tick below 340. So if that's accurate, they're already well past where we were a year ago. Well, actually, a year ago, they're at $322 million going into opening day. So they are nowhere close to where they were last year. Now you look at Cott's baseball contracts, which seems to be pretty accurate typically. They're at $345 million on the Mets right now. So a little less, of course, than what Spot Track has. And then you got Fangraphs has them at $336 million. No matter which way you slice it, the Mets have already blown past what the expectation was for them when Steve Cohen said their payroll would be around the same as it was last year. And he also noted that you still have to leave money for in-season spending on the trade market, for prospect promotions, for picking up players, dropping players. You also have the benefits that are part of the CBA that you have to pay for. So the Mets, again, are already past where we thought they were going to be. So if you're already past it, in the wise words of Steve Cohen, if you're already through the threshold, blow through it. Maybe the Mets are in that mode. Maybe missing out on Kyle Tucker has poked a bear in Steve Cohen, and he wants to spend like crazy. But how would giving Bellinger that contract affect the Mets beyond 2026? Does this block them from spending on Scooble next year? Well, right now, the 2027 payroll, again, depends on where you look, but we'll just go to Spot Track. They have the Mets sitting at $250 million, around there, a little bit less. And that's if Bo Bichette and Clay Holmes pick up their respective player options. You add on $42 million for Bellinger, now you're sitting close to a $300 million payroll before you even factor in the ARB guys, the player benefits, the pre-ARB guys. This is actually just the guaranteed contracts that are on your books. Should be north of $290. But that's assuming that Bichette, Holmes, and Bellinger all opt in. All of them could opt out, and you'd have plenty of money to spend. The Dodgers right now are sitting at a payroll over $400 million, $413 million. If Cohen says, F it, we got to compete with the Dodgers, so we're blowing through our current payroll, we're going to get it up to $400 million. If he wants to foot that bill, the Mets are a better team. So I have no problem with the Mets signing Cody Bellinger. If it was my team, my money, would I be giving Cody Bellinger $126 million over 3 years? Probably not. I don't know if I would give Bo Bichette that money, but you know what? It's not my money. It's Steve Cohen's money. And when you have the amount that he does and the ability to spend the way he does, and you want to put a good team on the field, why not go for it? And so I applaud Steve Cohen. I applaud David Stearns for the way this offseason has gone, the way that he's reading markets, because ultimately, if you do sign Bellinger to the 3-year deal with the opt-outs, just like you did with Bichette, you have some light at the end of the tunnel to get out of those contracts. Not to mention, Cody Bellinger has no qualifying offer attached. So you don't have to give up the draft picks and well, you already gave up the bonus pool. You're not going to give up the bonus pool money if you sign another qualifying offer free agent. They gave up their 2nd and 5th round pick, or the 2nd and 5th highest selection. I shouldn't say round. Their 2nd and 5th highest selection. So you got comp picks back for Edwin Diaz and Pete Alonso because they were qualifying offer free agents. Well, that now is in your draft pool. So your 2nd and 5th highest picks, as well as $1 million in bonus pool money in 2027. That's what they already forfeited for Bo Bichette, the qualifying offer tendered free agent. Beyond that now, if they sign Framber Valdez, for example, their 3rd and 6th highest pick go to. So all of a sudden you still have your 1st highest selection, you have your 4th highest selection, and then you lose all your picks until your 7th highest pick. So I'd assume you'd be forfeiting both of the comp picks that you got from Alonso and Diaz walking, which is also part of the Mets' strategy potentially, is it allows you to more readily add the other qualifying offer of free agents. So that's all of the money and all the boring stuff. I will tell you that part of me almost feels like, I'm sure some of you have felt this way before. Have you ever been out to dinner where somebody's picking up the bill, and going into the meal, you're looking at the menu, and I don't know, maybe other people are different, but for me, if I know that I'm out to dinner with my parents and they're going to pay for it and it's not me, I'm typically not going to get the steak. I might get a burger instead, right? I might not, go all out. I might not get an alcoholic drink with dinner. I might just get a soda because I don't want to have somebody else pick up a $15 drink. That's sort of how I feel about asking the Mets to sign Cody Bellinger or Framber Valdez at this point. Asking Cohen to go even deeper because he is paying 110% surcharge on every dollar that he spends. So if he gives Bellinger 42, I mean, what does that come out to? Let's do quick math. 42. I mean, what, like $88 million when you add in the luxury tax penalty, something along those lines. And so you'd be paying Cody Bellinger and Bo Bichette like 176 million for the upcoming season. That's insane for two guys that are good players, guys that can be all-stars, but it's not Kyle Tucker. Let's be honest. It's not a potential of having a top 10 hitter in the game. Maybe Bichette puts it all together. Who knows? But my point is, for me, it feels weird to sit here and say, yeah, Mets, go out there and get Cody Bellinger. But if Steve Cohen is in F it billionaire mode, I have FU money to spend. I'm going to spend it. Who am I to stop him? And how loaded would the Mets be if they got Cody Bellinger? That's the thing. Francisco Lindor, Juan Soto, Bo Bichette, Cody Bellinger. That's your 1 through 4. Polanco's batting 5th. Maybe it's Beatty 6th playing first with Polanco DHing. You got Alvarez behind the dish. Carson Bench now can be in left or center, but trust me, I don't think Cody Bellinger is signed to be a center fielder. I think it'd be Bench in center. It'd probably be Bellinger in right and Soto in left if they really want to put together the best defensive team possible. And then you got Simeon, who I would bat 9th as your defensive first, second baseman. And your bench, without making any other moves, you'd have Vientos, Acuna, Torrens, Taylor. It's a damn good bench. It's a damn good 1 through 9. That is a very good team. You trade for Freddy Peralta and you roll from there and you go win a World Series. That's the type of roster that can compete with the Dodgers. So maybe the Mets do it. And if they did it, that's the best lineup that they could probably put together 1 through 9 outside of trading for Jarren Duran. But if money doesn't matter, hold on to your prospects and sign Bellinger, especially when he's not a qualifying offer tendered free agent. And go win a World Series. Hopefully everybody has a great season. And then all of them opt out and your books are clean. Again, going back to my restaurant metaphor, I feel a little bit weird saying the Mets need to sign Cody Bellinger. They already spent 42 on Bichette. Do it again. Give Bellinger the same deal. And who cares that Steve Cohen has to foot a tax bill that's going to be in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And for those two players, it's going to be close to $180 million to just have those two players as New York Mets next season, factoring the tax with their salaries. I feel like a spoiled rich kid asking for that. I really do. And maybe I'm alone in that. Maybe nobody else thinks it's a little bit crazy. But again, for me, I am in child mode with the rich dad that, or whatever. I am of the mindset of, okay, Brett Beatty can play some left field. Sign Austin Hayes for $7-8 million. Form a little platoon out there, and you got a good farm system. You got a good team. Go trade for Freddy Peralta. Sign Sir Anthony Dominguez, and we call it an offseason there. Like I am in the more realistic mind frame of what the Mets should do. But best team possible and best future outlook possible is trading for Bellinger. It's holding on to as many prospects as you can. Obviously, you might still put some on the table for Peralta because he's the best pitcher that's left available. And you go from there. So that's where I think things stand here with Cody Bellinger. Does it make financial sense for the Mets to do it? No. Does it, completely contradict what we thought the plan was this offseason in terms of spending to now blow through and get towards a $400 million payroll? Yes. But if Steve Cohen wants to, any and all Mets fans should be happy that Cody Bellinger could come into the fold here and be the cleanup hitter for the New York Mets with Bo Bichette batting third. That's a loaded team. And so I do hope it happens because it would just be awesome to watch. And you figure out your 2027 payroll later, but I don't think there's really going to be a season until the Mets win a World Series where Steve Cohen is going to look at the payroll and see glaring holes on the roster and say, I can't spend. And that's the beauty of having Steve Cohen as the Mets owner. And that's why fans should be really grateful that this guy continues to foot the bill, because it's an expensive bill to compete this way. It's expensive to try to compete with a Dodgers team that has all the financial advantages that the Mets don't. They have the TV deal that's insane. They have money that's funneling in from an international market with Ohtani. It's completely different. But Steve Cohen's super rich, and he can still compete like few can. So that's where we're at with Bellinger. But if the Mets are going to be a little more realistic, what are some options that they've been connected to? We're going to close the show there in just a minute. If you already live your team every day, now it's time to take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everyday Club and get Locked On Mets with no interruptions. You also get members-only Discord access and access to a merch shop. So if you want to be part of the Everyday Club, go to lockedonmets.supercast.com, or you can find the link in the episode description. All right, so The Athletic came out with another story on what they're hearing about the New York Mets, with Will Salmon giving us all of his latest reports. And so here are some of the players the Mets have been linked to. We'll start with what he says about Bellinger. He says, for the Mets, Bellinger represents just one of several possibilities, albeit one on the higher end of price and potential impact. Other names worth watching include Harrison Bader, Lars Nootbaar, Jake Myers, and Luis Robert, league sources said. We've talked about all those names throughout the offseason. Bader has felt unlikely, but now with where the Mets are at with their payroll, why not throw a huge one-year deal at Harrison Bader and see if he takes it? Because there's no qualifying offer. It's just cash. Probably gives you one of your better defensive teams possible. You know he likes playing in New York. Coming off a great season. He could be your starting center fielder. You then have in left Carson Bench. I think with Bader's presence on the roster, you might even, if you wanted to, find a potential trade where, you look at like the Royals, right? And they have Kyle Isabel, who I believe is a left-handed bat in center field. Maybe they, who should just sign Bader themselves, if they can't afford Harrison Bader, maybe they wouldn't mind Tyrone Taylor. And so maybe you find a trade destination for Tyrone Taylor. Bader's your starting center fielder. Acuna's your fourth outfielder. Or if you wanted to keep Tyrone Taylor, you still can. It's just there's something about running back the same center field from 2 years ago, the same situation with Bader and Taylor that I don't entirely love. But again, Harrison Bader is coming off such a good season. I can see the justification there, especially because you don't have to trade anything to get him. You don't have to give him a multi-year deal. I don't think if it's a heavy one-year deal with a AAV over 20 million, which is not going to get anywhere else. I could see how Bader's still a fit. Nootbaar, I've thought was going to be the answer for a while now, and I still think it's on the table. I think it's probably a trade the Mets already have agreed to in principle, in the sense that I imagine that the Cardinals probably have a prospect in mind from the Mets that they would like for Lars Nootbaar. It's not going to cost a ton. He's a left-handed bat that has some upside. Has had some good seasons in the past. He had double heel surgery in October, which hopefully is going to get him right physically. He also has experience with your director of Major League Hitting in Jeff Albert. So that one makes a lot of sense to me. Jake Myers less so. I think there's less upside with the bat, more with the glove, but I feel like at that point, just play Tyrone Taylor. Just because Jake Myers hits left-handed and hit 290 last season, it was the most fugazi 290 average you'll ever see. I just don't believe in the player offensively, so I wouldn't go there. Luis Robert, the upside's awesome. The downside is pretty bad, and I don't think that Chris Getz is reasonable with his asks for Luis Robert, so I don't necessarily foresee that one. But if you can get a trade done where Luis Acuna is the headliner and you're taking on the cash for Robert, I'd be all in on that. It's just if they want even Mark Vientos, who knows? Now that you already have Bichette, you have a right-handed bat, maybe you don't care anymore. Maybe you're willing to trade Vientos for Robert, and if you don't care about money, then and you're trying to get rid of Vientos, I can get my head around it, but I just prefer to keep Vientos as your DH, and I'd prefer to just play Brett Beatty in left. It's not as good of a defensive team, obviously, but we still don't know what Beatty is going to look like out there, and it's way more control of Vientos than control on Robert. He's a tough player. That's one where you almost just have to see the trade and then react if it was a good move or not based on who went the other way and how much money you took on. Now, they mentioned Jarren Duran in here, but not in a way that makes you think it's going to happen. He says, in theory, Jarren Duran could be another option, but rival executives aren't fully convinced the Boston Red Sox end up trading him. He mentions the qualifying offer and what it would take for the Mets if they sign another player with the qualifying offer. As I mentioned before, they've already given up their second and fifth highest selection and $1 million in their bonus pool for next year. They would have to give up their third and sixth highest picks as well. So that brings you to the starting pitchers who have QOs, Framber Valdez and Zach Gallen. Are they okay with it? He says losing 2 more draft picks is a deterrent, but it won't necessarily stop the Mets from making a deal. People familiar with their thinking said it is simply a matter of financial costs in addition to the draft picks. If you wanted to sign Framber Valdez, I don't think you let a couple picks in the draft stop you from doing that. I really don't. And you're probably going to give up more to get Freddy Peralta than the 2 draft picks when it comes to future value for your franchise. But Peralta's a better pitcher. He's making less money. So again, it kind of comes back to how crazy does Steve Cohen want to get with his payroll? If he wants a $400 million payroll, not necessarily once, but is okay with it, then yeah, theoretically, sign Framber. But I don't know. I would say this. At this stage of the game, if the contracts were similar, I think I'd be more inclined to pay Cody Bellinger than Framber Valdez because you don't have to get the draft picks. I think the alternatives for Bellinger internally just aren't anywhere near as good as the Mets' alternatives internally for Framber. I think they have a pretty good pitching staff right now. I know that sounds crazy, but they got 8 viable big league starters. Griffin Canning, I think, would probably be open to a return. The Mets are interested. So if you brought in Canning to add out to your depth, it's not a bad way to go about it. Canning obviously is coming off the Achilles, but apparently he's ahead of schedule and he might be available for early in the season. So I don't know. I wouldn't be afraid of that when it comes to the rotation. Other possibilities on the trade front outside of Freddy Peralta, Chris Bubich and Mackenzie Gore, but he says both are considered as long shots for the Mets. It does seem like this team will add a starting pitcher, will add an outfielder, and for all we know, they could still decide to add to their bullpen. So there's still a lot of offseason left, even though there's not that much offseason left in terms of weeks left before pitchers and catchers report. It's a little less than a month, I think, at this stage. But you have, right now, a team that has a ton of trade assets. They have an owner that can spend like crazy if he wants to. And there's still options on the table. So if Framber or Bellinger fall to the Mets in a price range they like for those specific deals, I think they'll still jump on it. My guess is right now the number one pursuit is Freddy Peralta. But the Brewers have a lot of interest there. So how long is that going to drag out? And how does that impact the market for the top starting pitchers left? If it's Framber or Peralta, you don't want to lose Framber because you're waiting on Peralta. The last thing I'd mention, Tarek Skubal is not completely off the table. The fact that he might make $32 million this upcoming season through arbitration has put him back on the trade block. Not many teams can pay that. So I just want to leave that out there as well. That's another thing to watch out for. The arbitration hearings for MLB teams. Let me confirm. I think it's late January, early February. Let me see really quick. So the dates for that, yeah, it's late January and mid-February. So between January 26th and February 20th. So that's the one issue. But the Mets could go into camp with the rotation that they have. And who knows, Peralta might not get dealt before then. I think he probably will. but Skubal might not. So there might still be opportunities out there for the Mets to address their rotation. There's certainly going to be free agents that are hanging out into spring training. So we'll see. We'll see what they decide to address first. I don't think they have to address their rotation, though. They sort of have to address their outfield. So we'll see where the Mets go. Cody Bellinger is in play. It's just kind of a crazy play to make, but not one that I'm going to be mad at. And if Steve Cohen wants to spend like that, thank you to Steve. And let's just enjoy what could be an awesome Mets season if they do it. Anyway, that's going to be all for this edition of Locked On Mets. I appreciate all of you for tuning in. I really enjoyed doing the show on Brett Baty yesterday. I think Super Utility is the place for Baty. At some point this week, I want to talk about the difference between trading Baty and trading some of your top prospects, sort of continue on that conversation. And there's also at some point probably a topic that needs to be had about Mark Vientos now that Bichette's on the table, similar to what we did on Baty. Doesn't make sense to just dump Vientos somewhere. Does he still have a role on the team? A lot of great topics we'll have to discuss this week with a very interesting Mets team out there landed Bo Bichette. So we'll continue to go every single day, potentially all the way up until opening day, as long as this team stays this exciting. Really appreciate all of you tuned in over the weekend. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network.